I'm calling for the upset, baby. FSU. Oh, outright. Go back to the days of 1982, Ben. Ooh. Marcus Dupree racing down the sidelines in Lincoln and Memorial Stadium. One of my all-time favorite OU running backs back in the day. But typically, I would be inclined to take the underdog. I just say, now that Scott Frost is out, the players want to show that they can win, and it's obviously a rivalry game. Playing at home, they want to erase that memory of Georgia Southern. But I can't do it with a defense that's given up 207 rushing yards to opposing offenses. Secondary is getting absolutely abused. Here's the other factor as well. Mark Whipple's there, 3 weeks? 3 weeks? Is he on the phone calling up for other coaches and other jobs? You need an OC for bowl time? That's the one thing in terms of the interim staff. Are they checked in or are they checked out outside of Mickey Joseph? That's a concern for me. Even though Oklahoma played down to Kent State last week, I think they're geared up for this. This is one of my better plays for the day. Line open up at 26, down to 24.5, and balloon to 27.5. We love numbers, so let's give numbers. Since 2014, Penn State 7-0 against MAC opponents, have won those games by an average margin of victory of 31.7 points per game. The last 5 under James Franklin, they're 5-0, have won those games by an average margin of victory, guys. 37.6 points per game. Got this victory last year over Ball State, 44-13. The potential look ahead against Auburn, I don't think it happens. They are 33-7 straight up, not challenged, especially in 2 games. One in particular against Western Michigan. They're going to get challenged today. If they can run the football, then Peyton Thorne could work off a play action. In my opinion, going to be very difficult. I'm going to back the Huskies here because of their offense, converting 64% on third down conversion. That puts pressure on the offensive line and, more importantly, the quarterbacks, whether it be Haynes King or now today with Max Johnson, and that's how this game will play out. If they can run the football consistently, they have an opportunity to cover this number today. Last 2 meetings have been decided by a total of 12 points, 6 points each, but when Boston College could only pound the rock for 76 yards rushing per game, that's going to force Djokovic into predictable long third downs. Clemson dials their ear back. I think they win this ball game convincingly. Lay in 20.5. I think they cover this number. Typically struggle with speed teams, and I don't think UCLA's front 7 is getting enough hype in terms of this matchup. 83 rushing yards allowed to opposing offenses. If DTR and that offense jump up early, just the way they did against Washington, Kev, what does Cam Rising and that offense do? Can make them one-dimensional and predictable, and that'll benefit the secondary of the Bruins in this matchup. To me, that's the recipe to beating Baylor in this matchup. I think Oklahoma State forces Shapen into long third down situations. I think the ability to jump up. And let's not forget, in terms of Oklahoma State in this matchup, guys, Braden Johnson and Brennan Presley, 2 big play wide receivers, 26 receptions, 466 yards, 4 touchdowns. They can challenge Baylor over the top just the way Iowa State did, and that's why I give the inside edge to the Cowboys in this ballgame. Houston had one of the top third down defenses in all of college football last year, holding opposing offenses to 25%. Clayton Tune's in college for about 10 years. He's still the trigger man for the Houston Cougars. It's amazing when we talk about transfers and how long, Adrian Martinez has been with Nebraska and Kansas State. Clayton Tune's in Houston since the days of Major Applewhite and Tom Herman, so it's incredible. I think it's a great pick. He's a road grader in terms of the offensive tackle position, blue-collar type of player, and the ability to run the football with Dalvin Cook. When was the last time Auburn was an underdog against a non-conference opponent at home? It came back in 2016.
I feel like you have the answer to your own question.
2016 against the Clemson Tigers and Dabo Swinney. Why? Because they just never schedule very hard, difficult non-conference games at home, or they play on the road or on a neutral field site. So this is a tough matchup. And when you look at the quarterback position, whether it be Robbie Ashford or TJ Finley, this offense for Auburn, 1 passing touchdown, 4 INTs.
Right.
That's the matchup going up against that secondary led by Joey Porter. I think it's all Penn State today. Wouldn't shock me if they win this ball game by double digits. I will say this about last year's game. This was a very close game in the first half in Rice-Eccles. What happened after that? Second half, they blew it open with Garbers at the helm. DTR did not play in that ball game. And here's the other factor as well when I break it down in favor of UCLA. We think that Utah's this dominant road team since 2019 under Kyle Whittingham, basically 500, 10-9 straight up on the road or on a neutral field site. They typically struggle against explosive offenses, teams that can get them out of their game plan, and that's what I think the Bruins could do today. Only throw for 150 yards in back-to-back games. Okay, no problem. They have Miss State on deck, an average type of defense. They got absolutely abused in Stark Vegas. Offense and defensive lines for Texas A&M got kicked in the teeth. This is Alabama. This is a different animal. I will say this. This is Texas A&M Super Bowl. There is nothing left right now. So if they're going to step up, this is the game that they do it. I don't think they win, but I'm going to incline to take the 23.5, 24 points on the road in this matchup, guys. Giving up 344 passing yards per game. Bo Nix has faced this defense before. Give me Auburn. I think they strike the upset over LSU today. One of my better picks. This is a very intriguing ballgame. I talk about the uniform bowl in terms of the Big 12. It's going to look fantastic on the screen. The uniforms across the Big 12. Wait until we get to Oklahoma State and Arizona State as well. That's why I like the over in this ballgame. Now, from the series perspective, Ole Miss has won 3 straight against Vandy by an average margin of victory of 24 points per game. They can run it for 260 on the ground, throw it right in the area of about 208, but I expect Dart to challenge that defense over the top. Keep in mind as well, USC to Lane Kiffin's offense now a little bit different transition, and that's why you're seeing some struggles out of Jackson Dart early on, but he's still playing well within the system, guys. Peterman in Pittsburgh with Deshaun Watson at the helm since 2014. They're 66-6 straight up against ACC opponents. And last year they won their games at home in Death Valley by 21 points per game. Throw in the fact that NC State on the road or on a neutral field over the last 3 seasons is just 6-11 straight up. With Dave Doran, I'm not sold on the passing game of Devin Leary. I think Clemson steps up and wins this ball game anywhere from 10 to 13 points Saturday night in Death Valley. 102 degrees in the Rose Bowl today. Hot. That could be a factor. However, I think the speed of UCLA is the difference here. I think they're the most complete offense and defense alliance in the conference. Catching 10-1, I think they win the Pac-12. And I think DTR is a long shot for the Heisman. I like them today. I think they win this ball game by 30 or more. You can't count on Matt Ryan, and, he's a prototypical drop-back passer. You know where he's going to be. If the offensive line breaks down, you could hit him, you could throw him off his mark, and that's not the NFL today. So not sure the route that Atlanta wants to go, but clearly I think they would have a dynamic playmaker if they did select Justin Fields in the upcoming draft. We hear about how Hawaii on a week 1 matchup, they're 11-1 against the number, and that's true, but Vandy did cover 4 straight at the end of the year to Missouri, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Kentucky, and they put up points on those defenses. I like Vanderbilt here. Their defense came around in the second portion of the year under Clark Lee. I think this team is going to be motivated. They know they can win this matchup. Michael Wright is a dual threat type of quarterback. Keep an eye out for Vanderbilt because I'm telling you, I think they could be a 3 or a 4 win football team. They win this ball game by double digits. They win it in the interior. Only 1 starter back for Hawaii. Yeah, and you look at the numbers in terms of Texas A&M under Jimbo Fisher. Last 3 years against non-conference opponents, 13-2 straight up. At home the last 3 years, at home in Kyle Field, 10-1 straight up. So the numbers favor Texas A&M. Line open up at 16.5. Balloon now over to the key number of 17. Yeah. It's 18.5 by kickoff. But to me, he's a raw Baker Mayfield coming out of Oklahoma. He does utilize the tight end, and I think that's the one positive attribute that you could say about Zach Wilson's game. But go back to 2019, struggled against Utah, struggled against Tennessee, struggled against Washington, all Power 5 competition, Mike. Well, they're going to need their trigger man, Anthony Richardson, to have a dynamic performance. And it's not just on the ground. I think it's vertically in the passing game. He did throw for $168 last week. He's going to need a better effort in this matchup going up against a very disciplined secondary in terms of the Kentucky Wildcats. That's the one thing that Mark Stoops has built in Lexington, their ability to shut down the run, force long third down conversions, and more importantly, challenge defenses over the top. That secondary has been as opportunistic as any in the conference over the past 3 years. So that's the matchup. But this game comes down to 2 factors. I think Michigan does have the better defensive front entering this matchup. You look at some of the defensive pieces lost by Minnesota. Carter Coughlin's gone, their big play defensive end. Antoine Winfield Jr. from that secondary. They lose Tyler Johnson that led the team with receptions, and they lose 2 running backs in Shannon Brooks and Rodney Smith for the Hokies coming off the dominant win over Sam Howell and the crew. But let's not forget that they do have West Virginia on deck. That's a rivalry that now is renewed in 2021. And you also have Bailey Hockman, the former NC State quarterback that did toss 3 touchdown passes last week in the home win over Monmouth. They go on the road. They're catching 19.5, potentially 20 points in this battle. I know Virginia Tech is the better team on paper, but give me Middle Tennessee State plus the 20 points. I think they keep it a lot closer than people think this coming Saturday. The one thing that travels well on the road is the running game. That's what Florida State can do. They're pounding the rock for 203 yards on the ground. I think they can run on the front 7. I'm not sold that this is the same defense as NC State was last year. They got beat up on the ground by Clemson. That was their big game of the year. They limped back home. And here's the other factor as well in terms of Devin Leary. 60% completion percentage, but let's take 2 games out. UConn and Charleston Southern, which are horrific teams from a defensive perspective. He's only completed 58% of his passes, 205 yards. That is the strength of Florida State right now, holding opposing offenses to only 174 yards through the air. I think they're in this game from start to finish. I'm calling for the upset, baby. FSU. Outright over NC State today. When you just look at Clemson as a whole going up against the offensive line of North Carolina, that is the matchup. Clemson in back-to-back games against Miami and South Carolina took away the running game. Miami only rushed for 1.2 yards per carry. South Carolina, 1.7 yards per carry. Last 3 games against Louisville, Miami, and now South Carolina, third down defense, 21, 27, 23. So you got to believe that, obviously, that'll put pressure on the offensive line of North Carolina, Kev, and that is still the weakness. Drake May sacked 34 times on the year. That's why I favored Clemson, because of the physicality of the offense and defensive lines. If May has no time to throw, short to intermediate throws under coverage, and that's why I favor Shipley in the rushing attack.
They revenge that loss and get themselves a spot in the college football playoff, laying 2.5 in Vegas.
They can, but they won't. I think it's status quo. I think Utah strikes the mild upset. I already booked it at plus 2.5 and plus 125 on the money line. They're 4-1 over their last 5 games, Carver. The only loss came to Oregon. That front 7 has held opposing offense. It's the 65.8 rushing yards per game. Everybody talked about how Notre Dame was going to pound the rock through USC's throat. They didn't have the type of personnel to do it. Utah does. I think they step up. Keep an eye out for Cam Rising. All the pressure on Caleb Williams at USC. I'm rolling with the Utes, baby. They strike the upset and knock the Trojans out of the college football playoff. A lot of young players on this team. Harold Perkins, Noah Kane, Neighbors, Keyshawn Booty, and even Jaden Daniels that's playing in his first championship game in terms of college football up against the national champions. Yeah. So that's the difference in terms of the mindset as opposed to maybe a team like Alabama, a team like Ohio State that maybe might be in the spot with no potential shot at a college football playoff. That's the difference. And I think the LSU Tigers step up today and give it their best effort. I think they're going to see a lot of points in this matchup. But if TCU does start fast, if they do jump up by double digits, 10-0, how does that affect J.J. McCarthy and the play-action passing game? That's the biggest thing, I think, heading into this matchup and why you're seeing TCU get some money right now, because they have the potential, if they start fast, to maybe get Michigan out of their game plan. So we'll see how it plays out. I think there's no doubt Michigan wins this ball game, but I think it could be a very close matchup, and I'm inclined to take the points and the speed of TCU, especially when you look at that performance on the road in Austin where they shut down Bijan Robinson and Rayshawn Johnson. If they could do that against Donovan Edwards and the offensive line of Michigan, they're going to be in this ball game from start to finish. I really like Ohio State here. They have the speed to challenge Georgia over the top, and I think it's going to be a 4-quarter game. And I'll just say this about the spread perspective. Justin Fields against Clemson, catching 6.5. Clemson against Alabama, national championship game, both 6.5-point dogs. They covered. So Ohio State, in my opinion, is live today. At the end of the day, TCU has proved they deserve to be there. They knocked off a blue-collar team and a big-time head coach in Jim Harbaugh, and now they're going to have to do it again. The fact that it's under 2 touchdowns believes that they should be in this ball game, but they're going to have to play, in my opinion, a perfect game to knock off Georgia. You're not going to get as sloppy of a play from the Georgia Bulldogs in back-to-back games. Going to be an uphill battle, in my opinion. They might be able to cover the number, but I still believe Georgia covers the number and wins their second national championship.